Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the fantastic comedian Mo Gilligan. And in talking a little bit about the way that you've kind of shaped your specific style of comedy and humor in your stand-up shows, which you're touring at the moment, I was interested in just kind of the early experimentation where you would try things like, how does it feel if I start doing some political jokes here? Finding that
Yeah.
observational quality. What does it feel like if I sit down on a stool versus moving around the stage? And how
Mm.
having early shows in your career to really just play in a lot of spaces has shaped the style of your comedy at this stage in your career.
Yeah. I think when it comes to comedy, I've definitely grown in confidence with my ability. So the more I've been able to do shows, the more confident I've felt on stage. And that comes down to my material. So I kind of knew, I think early on when I started doing comedy, I'd try some political jokes, I'd try satire, I'd try to be really witty, but then I realized I'm like, it got the laugh, but not the one I wanted. But when I was able to tell maybe a story or, even impressions, you still have to be like, is it a good enough impression? And, you're doing someone's accent, am I still doing it right? So I started realizing quite early on, I was like, okay, I'm seeing the thing that I'm most comfortable at and that I'm very good at. And the way that I can try and talk about politics is probably in a different way that doesn't feel like I'm telling you what's going on in the world. It's more my observation of the world. And I feel like that comes in time, And then with that, it's just how comfortable you are on stage. It's only like if I do a big show, I don't really feel like it aids me sitting on a stool. I like to be physical. I like to walk around I like to see my audience. So there are some shows I've done that's small that I might, sit on a stool and stuff. But before I get on stage, my thing is I love going on stage before there's anyone there. I love going to an empty stage if I can, because it lets me know that, okay, is the stage too deep? Even when we was at the show that you came to on the Friday at Gramercy, there was a wash of lights, and I was like, we need to turn those off because it's too bright and it just makes the stage look bigger than it is. And I kind of need to look small, but with my energy, I need to make it big. But yeah, it just comes in time for how comfortable you feel and sometimes where your material's going. I tend to work more on my voice and my projection than I do so much on where sitting on a stool and stuff. I think my voice and my projection is key to my timing of telling some of the material as well. So that's probably the thing that I work on the most.
And it's so interesting with what you're describing about just kind of finding the specific material that really spoke to you, because I've heard you describe your comedy as being intentional escapism. And it's that thing of, even
Yeah.
when you were hosting your show of, we're kind of like living in this discourse throughout the entire day, and you really want to create a specific space where you can step away from that and its observations about different facets of life versus kind of how do I dive into the current news. And so how has that idea of intentional escapism really shaped a lot of your material?
Yeah, I think for me it's helped a lot because I think, every comic's different. I knew my bag was never going to be being topical, even being topical or political, because there are things that work in a snapshot of that time and you can write something, create something, and it works at that time. But then you realize I've got to do a world tour from now until mid 2025. Is that thing that we're all talking about still going to be current when I do it in 2025? I remember, and sometimes as comics, we get this thing that we call like a stimulus package, which is like there's something that's happened that we're all going to talk about for a good year or two. It might be like Will Smith and Chris Rock. It might be, the pandemic was great for loads of comics because everyone had some stuff about the pandemic, lockdown. But now we're like 4 years on from that. So it's quite hard still trying to, even now, I'm like, I don't really want to talk about the thing that happened 4 years ago because it feels like we're kind of getting further and further away. Um, so yeah, I believe with comedy for me, what always works is, my storytelling ability of putting it's my POV, but I'm trying to give an audience an insight to my world with trying to take them on this ride of like, like this is what, when I first started doing touring, I was in a place where my world was very new. So I wanted to my audience to experience that as well. So I wanted my audience to come on this ride with me and be like, this is how my life is changing. I'm kind of catching up with it. Whereas now, that's why I call my tour in the moment, because I'm like trying to live a bit more in the moment. I'm trying to, you know, you go to this place of Hollywood and you're like, cool, I'm here, treat my friends, and you realize you're like, this is too expensive. I can't keep up with this thing, but I'm trying to be a bit more current and understand what like to be single and not when I was single and then but then realizing it's like I kind of like being in a relationship and what comes with that, which I love doing the thing where I can talk about a thing and kind of explain my world, my point of view on the world, but then realize everyone in the audience is like, yeah, we do that. I do that. That is true. Um, and I guess it's just trying to bring all those parts together. So, I don't want to alienate anyone who's single in the audience, but I don't want to feel that the couples in the audience feel like they're left out. So you try to bring both parties together so people can laugh, but also recognize their flaws and their the things that they like about themselves. And it like, yeah, okay, fair enough. That is fair.
And you were touching there on one of the stories that you tell in your show, which is kind of like, oh, I'm really lucky in that I'm getting to have these meetings and be out in LA for this stuff. And you have a whole thing about going to a really exclusive club, getting ushered in the front door, but then that moment of, oh, I've bought something that I didn't have a price for, and now I'm completely screwed. And how am I going to navigate through this really socially uncomfortable situation? And so, how do you set about kind of even when you're telling stories where maybe the audience aren't having that same experience, finding that
Mm.
scope and that emotional connectivity of, what are they going to pull into? What are they going to relate to within this story?
Yeah, I think it's that thing where it's realizing. I think for me, whenever I tell that piece, it always stems from a place where you, in your head, you're like, you want to get to that place. And, we live life like where we're like, oh, my achievements is to, do well at college and get this thing where you realize we all have that kind of little bit of ego. And you're like, and even for me, I said it was like, I want to be the guy. I want to be the man. I don't want people to think I'm broke. I want to get everyone the bottles and all that kind of stuff. But then realizing it comes at a cost, which the cost is I can't afford it. And I'm kind of like, it was probably a point in my life where I was living way too quicker than I could catch up with, essentially. And I think that's, what I always want is people to take different parts from it. Some people will just like, that's funny. I get that. I know that feeling, but it's the feeling where when I was in that position, it's fun, but then you go home at the end of the night, it's finished, you wake up the next day and it's done and no one cares. And I think that's what I kind of always wanted to show with that piece specifically. That's why I kind of start the show with that, where it's like you get to Hollywood, it's this amazing place you've always wanted to go to. And then again, I felt like that thing of why I say Hollywood puts you on a pedestal that you're not everyone knows what that's gonna be like. And I didn't want it to be a piece where it's just like, look how cool it was when I went to the club and got bottles. And I was like, yes, at that moment when I got it, it was amazing. But the downside is I had to pay for it and it's very expensive and it was an awful night. And trying to take my comedy on that journey of I think for me it's like it's I've always learned with comedy it's okay to have an audience laugh with me, but also I have to be honest and I don't mind being laughed at. And I feel like that's why I am in that position. I take my audience through the journey where I'm like, where they're all with me and they're like, yeah, and everyone's like, oh, okay. And then realizing it's like, it was fun. You get a drink, you get a drink. And then before you know it, I gotta pay the bill and I'm like, this is way too expensive and I can't actually afford this actual lifestyle that I thought I wanted, but actually this is not what I want. Um, and it was at a different time in my life where I say, I was single and you're trying to do those things to impress people around you who you don't know, essentially. And I feel like that's why, that was like the first part when I started writing the tour. That was the part where I was like, normally you can do a story at the end. And I was like, I want to do it straight from the off, like introduce myself to the audience and come out and wherever city we're in, but we're going straight in with that kind of big story, which was a risk on my part because sometimes you can do a big story and your audience is like, okay, thought there'd be some quick one-liners, you know. So yeah, but it meant a lot to me because I think realizing that I'm going to be doing this tour for a long time, but especially in different places as well. So I want it to make sense in every place I get to do it in that understands that, you know, I went to Hollywood and I tried to keep up with, you know, the rappers and the NBA players, but I'm a comedian. This is not my life. This is not what comedians are meant to do, you know. So yeah.
And with that idea that obviously, you're kind of touring the same material every night, but you're also not, because you're also very specific. And even just going back to, referring to the show as In the Moment, the first like 15 or 20 minutes of the show that I saw in New York, you're talking very specifically about the experience of being in New York, being in the city, what it's like riding the subway here. And, how does that compare to London? What feels different about it? And kind of connecting to the audience very specifically in the room who are from there. And so when
Mm,
you're traveling to so many different places, how are you kind of setting about creating that element of fresh material that you're basically performing on stage for the first time in front of that audience,
yeah.
and also having material that you're really kind of workshopping and finessing night by night, like the bottle service story at the club?
Yeah, I think everywhere I'm traveling to, I'm never there for a long enough period. And as soon as I'm there, I'm trying to be, I'm not, it's not almost like I'm there and I'm like, let me write this down and write that down. But I'm trying to get those key observations of where I am and just be completely honest, but not kind of put the place down. It's really like, you know, highlighting when I first ever time I, went to Atlanta and getting off the plane. And I was like, oh my God, 80% of the people here are black. And I can hear R&B music in the airport. You get to the lobby, they're playing trap music. And I was like, okay, and again, you know, I was just like, when I get on stage, I'm going to talk about that from the off. If people laugh at it, then they do. If not, it's okay because I've still got my material. But yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm going to go to the place and pretend I know where I'm like, oh, I went down this road and you shouldn't go down there. And everyone says, oh, he knows, because I feel like the audience know. They're very, if you're from the place, they know like where you've been and where you haven't been, and like, but definitely tell people my first experiences, because I feel like your first experience of a place is your most natural and authentic. So, when we went to Toronto, I got there the day after the New York show. And again, my observations were like, it's just cold. I can't pretend that I've been to the hood and I've been to the nice part. I didn't. I was like, this place is freezing. I don't know how you guys live here and work around. Everyone's walking around like it's fun. It's -7. Like, and it's just those observations that the audience are like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, it is cold. And even that the way that they talk is quite similar slang wise to the UK. So that was my other observation. Um, and I feel like that's when it comes to comedy, I don't want to stress myself out of pretending to be like, I know this place, I'm going to make something funny and I'm going to do some crowd work with him and her and I'm going to get them involved. And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes like it normally does work. And there are sometimes where you're like, didn't work so much, but it's cool. I've got like an hour and 10 minutes of material anyway. So I don't ever put myself under too much pressure, but I love giving my perspective of the place we're in. And this is something new for me that I'm learning because there's so many other more places around the world that we're about to go to. So as I'm on this journey, especially in the States, realizing that this is one country, but every state feels almost like a different country is really refreshing at the same time.
Yeah. And I've heard you previously say that you're someone who likes to be really overly prepared when it comes to your work as well. And so when you're on tour and you're touring, the same show, but making those adjustments like you were just talking about, how does that sense of preparation night by night and week by week really shift and evolve? Because I'm sure it's really different a few months in than it is the first few nights where the whole show is
Mm.
completely new to you.
Yeah, I think whenever I start a tour and I do those first couple of nights, I am my most nervous and I kind of stick to the script of the show that I've written. I don't like to freestyle or go off the beaten track too much. But the more I get comfortable with it or realizing, there's a bit of a gap or that bit, it's not really, I've done it 2 shows now, and that bit I have there in the middle is not as tight as I want it to be, then I kind of get the chance to kind of be like, okay, cool, let me change that bit or let me take that bit out or that bit works really well. And I think what's nice as well is realizing on tour that as I'm taking some stuff, I'm adding some stuff. So from the first show we done in LA and Burbank to the one you see in New York, there'd been so many little subtle changes and bits that we had in that worked, and then bits that we done over time that I started to feel a bit bored of as well. I was like, oh, that middle bit, I don't like it, take it out, and you add something else in. But ultimately it's kind of having that flexibility. So the core is always going to be the same. So it's like say it's like a house, the structure is always the same, but you're just kind of redecorating a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So I feel that's probably the best way it's going to help me feel like it's always fresh as well. So by going to, Australia, we go to the Middle East next month. Again, that show you might have seen in New York might change slightly for an audience in Dubai, but then to Australia just to tighten up some bits. But the core will always kind of stay the same, essentially.
And also in terms of the audience as well, you have this kind of very immediate feedback loop night by night where, the pacing of a joke one night might end up being a little bit different the next night based on how an audience is giving you feedback. And you have this really
Mm.
great tool at the beginning of the show to kind of get a sense of what the feel in the room is, where there's a voice of God that's kind of talking and interacting with the crowd before you've even come out on stage, and then different music cues where people kind of start kind of dancing in their seats and singing along. And so in those moments, those first few minutes when you're standing backstage and you're kind of hearing and seeing the crowd before you've even come out and delivered material, how does that start to inform the show that we're going to get that night?
Yeah, that was an idea we added quite late on because I started realizing that a lot of places we're going, I don't have any support. In the UK, I'm lucky enough to have a support and have a DJ, but on this occasion, we just have a playlist, and I came with the idea of I was like, I need to get like a voice of God who can tell. Because for me, it's just the main thing I just want people is just like, please don't record it because I'm going to be doing this for like quite a while. And if like, and I don't even encourage people not to talk. I want you to talk, but just not loudly. I don't need to spoil it for everyone else. So we tried to put a few rules in place, but make it kind of funny. But then I was like, if it sounds like it's just a rule, and then I come out, it feels a bit like you're at school. So then we was like, let's just play some music and songs that people are gonna know, and there's this like, but make the voice kind of funny, like somewhere that is funny. And it was a last minute idea that we had on the show on. We had two shows on in New York. We had a show on the Wednesday. So on Tuesday, it was a realization. I was like, I don't have any support, like, and I haven't had any probably in the end, but I didn't want to rely on it. And I don't look at supporters like you go out there, warm them up for me and make. I just like I can do this. I've done this for a while, so I don't want to feel like I need to rely on anyone. And I always see supporters like, look, there's a bunch of people that will come out to see me. You're amazing. You're from the city. You're a great comic. Come and do 10 minutes if you want. Do you know what I mean? There's people here. It's a show. I never look at the support act to be like, yeah, warm them up and get them loose for me. And so when I come out, it makes it better. Um, but yeah, we had the idea to add like a voice of God to kind of tell the rules. It can be funny. We have some tracks, and I'm controlling those tracks as well. I'm just backstage being like pressing it, and I can hear, and I'm like, okay, they like that one, cut that one, and then it's like, cool. Now it's just time to bring myself on, and yeah, it's just something I've always wanted to add for a show, but just using the resources that we've got, which are limited at the moment. So, I'd love to get some comics to come down and support, but it's also really hard. And I always want to look at a show where it's just like, if I did have someone that they was planned to do the support and they couldn't do it, what would we do? So that's where this idea came up. And yeah, I spent a lot of Tuesday night, late at night, typing it up of like, say it like this. No, it doesn't. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, it works so great. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the way in which you built your career very early on, because I love just some of the details of strategy that you had super early on in your career. So even going back
Oh,
to when you were
thank you.
creating your own social media videos and uploading them, you were working in retail at Westfield and Shepherd's Bush. And even just that concept of, if I don't upload the video until after I finish work and I don't create it till then, less people are going to be online because they're all going to be kind of having dinner, going to bed. So I'm going to post it
Yeah.
at this time of day, or, finding Facebook pages for comedy venues and reaching out and kind of finding those opportunities for where you could get time on stage. And I was just interested in kind of looking back, what were some of those early kind of strategies that you feel like really helped to build your career up at the beginning?
Yeah, I think, when I first started out, I always knew I was going to be my own best promo in some ways. So, before the TikToks and the Instagram kind of reels, it was like, how can I get a gig? Because no one has seen my stuff. So I have to go to them, and I would turn up at a comedy club. Can I get 10 minutes? Message a comedy night. Can I do 10 minutes? And that was my way where I can just perform and just like, cool, done 10 minutes. Where's the next one? Where's another show that happens on a Friday or Saturday? And it was just following that pattern where you might get a message back, you might not. They might say, we book people 3 months in advance. Um, every person had a different strategy. So I won't say strategy. They had a different approach to how they would book comics. And initially, and I was just like, anywhere I get to perform is a performance. So if I perform in front of 10 people or 100 people, is a performance. Um, I didn't really care too much about money because I was like, that's not the end goal. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing it because I want to do some comedy. Um, so that was my early approach on using Facebook at that time. And then I knew when social media started to change, I used to be quite, I tried to be this whole purist comic of like, no, you've got to do, the shows in the club and you don't want to put your material. I didn't want to put material online. I didn't. And I just thought, I just used to see it as like someone might take it, people have already seen it. Um, and slowly but surely, I would have a few bits online that people could see, and just doing things that could get me in a comedy space that people was like, he's funny. There was this one show which was like a competition show. It used to do like dance battles, rap battles, and they had this comedy section where you get to do 7 minutes before the timer. Definitely not a comedy crowd, but you're kind of going into lines then. And I was just like, and the views that they had at that time on YouTube was huge. So I was like, if I can perform at this and do well, I can use this clip and it can maybe go viral at that time. And just using those things and all of those things slowly started helping and working. And then when social media came about, it allowed me to do content that I couldn't do on stage on my camera in my bedroom, try, accents and maybe get like a funny curly wig and try an impression of something. Um, and it was just silly. It wasn't a plan to go viral or be a content creator. It was just, this is silly. I think it's funny. Someone else might. And then one of them went viral. But the minute it went viral, I just was like, we'll do another one and we'll do another one. And while I was working at work, it was knowing that I realized I go on Instagram after I leave work from like 8 till 10. We used to call that peak time. And I'm like, when you go home from work, what do? You go home, you make some food. When you make your food, you go on your phone. Like you're gonna do that from 8 till 10. You're gonna go to bed at 10. So realizing like that's the pattern that I do. So that's when I need to put my content out. So when I'd finish work, I'd go to the changing room and I'd upload it at that time and then finish work at 9 o'clock and then I'd check. And then that I used to follow that same pattern of, making sure I post, even now I still copy the same formula of if it's a post of like, hey guys, I've got a tour date, we do that in the morning because people wake up, the first thing they do is check their phone. So it's that. If it's a funny video, Fridays nights and Saturday nights, pointless because everyone's out. Sunday's a perfect day for social media. So I normally upload Sunday afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evening. If there's a big story happening, probably not the best time that people want to see something funny. If there's something crazy happening in the world, or there's like something's happened at like a award show or something. So it's knowing when to post and not to post and just following that same pattern, which has really, really helped in some ways.
Yeah, no, that's so great. And also in terms of, when you look at the trajectory of your career, I'm sure that there's been moments where there've been certain things that have seemed like they're going to come together and maybe they don't. And
Mhm.
sometimes in reflection, it can be a gift because I feel like in looking at so many of the things that you've done in your career, you've really done things in a way that feels very authentic to, your passion, your joy, and that really comes forward in your comedy. When you were hosting the latest show with Mo Gilligan, that really felt like something that really tapped into the show that you wanted it to be. And that was pretty much what Channel 4 said to you was, we want to see what you can do with a show. Or Jimmy Fallon saying, I want to see your take on hosting That's My Jam and doing a British version of it.
Yeah.
And so even though there's been moments that have potentially been roadblocks that at the time you would have loved to not be, what has been the gift in ultimately looking back and seeing that you've had so many moments where you've gotten to do things that feel right and specific to you and your voice?
Yeah, timing is everything. It's so important. And if you told me when I was 20 that, you could do a tour and all that stuff, I would have said at 20, yeah, I can do that. But looking back in those early days of doing stand-up, I couldn't, wasn't able to craft material. I wasn't as good as reading an audience or a room. So yeah, I think really timing has always been key. And we've always looked at, I say we, I always say that because I speak to my manager a lot, and I was with my manager before any of this success happened. So in terms of like decisions, I've always looked at decisions where she's always been like, do you want to do this thing? And she's never said, you got to do this thing. It's great. She's like, do you want to do it? And I've looked at some things and I'm like, Ollie, this is a great thing to do. It's an amazing thing to do. It's a great opportunity. And then there's other things where you're like, that's great, but probably not where I am right now in my career. And probably give that to someone else who's going to really love that and really cherish that opportunity. But with me working on this project and that thing, to take this other thing on, doesn't really, it doesn't really make sense for me and the people that want to produce this project because ultimately I look at it as like spinning plates. So, there's only a few plates you can spin before one of them starts wobbling over and drops over. So yeah, it's always been really important of what we say no to as opposed to what we say yes to as well. And just like, yeah, you look at opportunities to do That's My Jam. I was lucky enough to be hosted loads of other shows in the UK, but that opportunity was so unique that it was like, wow, we're going to film it in LA at Universal Studios. Even if I ever get to just do this once, that is a phenomenal experience that I don't know if I'll ever get to do that again. And you go on a lot, and who doesn't want to work alongside someone like Jimmy Fallon and NBC? So you look at that opportunity, and it goes on the BBC, huge. And it was making sure that I was doing the right thing that was different from the other thing. So if done an interview and you're doing promo for That's My Jam, they'll say, so why is that different from latest show? I'm like, well, that's a Friday night show with guests on, and but this is a game show. And people say, well, what about the Big Breakfast? And I'm like, well, that's a breakfast show. And yeah, the Masked Singer is a family show. So I was able to always, whenever I was in the room, I could say, these are the reasons why I position myself to do different shows and put myself in places in different rooms of people's television that they wouldn't expect. And it's kind of doing the same thing with comedy a little bit. It's not coming over here in the States and being like, I'm going to sell out the biggest room in New York. It's like, no, Gramercy Theatre is cool. It's got, it's got nice history behind it. Everyone knows where it is. And just building it. I don't want to feel like I'm coming to a place and be like, hey, you know who I am? I'm going to do 5,000 here or this place here, and rest on the morals of what I've done in the UK. It's like, no, you want to, where's the cool place that people like to do comedy? And it's interesting because we've done this tour, people's like, oh, you should have done this room, it's much bigger. And it's like, yeah, but that's not really what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to put us in a place where people just walk past and they see Mo Gilligan there and they don't know who it is. And it's also realizing if 5% of my audience have never seen me, that's who you want where they drive past. They're, oh, Mo Gilligan sold out. I don't know who that is, but oh, check it out. That's who you kind of want to be targeting as well.
Yeah, no, it was so great to get to see you live in person. I know it was your first time playing New York, so
Oh, thanks.
congratulations on
Yeah,
another
yeah,
milestone in your
yeah.
career.
Thank
And
you.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking all about this. I really love all of the varied projects that you've built for yourself over the years and everything that you've done so far. And can't wait
Oh,
to
thank
see
you,
what else
man.
you do.
No, thank you so much, and thanks for the interview. I really enjoyed it, man. It's one of my favorite ones I've done for quite a while. It's nice to just talk about comedy stuff, and so yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.